as we were talking about, Paul and I, just briefly before the meeting started, this is a basic um, uh, levels of anonymity throughout the internet uh, through different browsers. Um, the lowest is the basic browser, which when you start it, basically doesn't have any privacy or security attached to it. Um, then you get to browser settings where a lot of the browsers nowadays come with some form of anonymity built in, such as cookie filtering and other types of protection. Um, then I have DuckDuckGo here as a level. Actually, DuckDuckGo is more than just a search engine. Nowadays, they actually do provide some forms of security levels in with cookie filtering and other types of protection to make your browsing safer. Um, then we go to incognito browser. And what that does, and again, a lot of the modern browsers now have the ability. And what that does is it allows you to change your um, your your browser header to be different than what is normally sent out. And there's a lot of information in your browser header, which we'll see in one of the demonstrations I'll show you. Uh, for example, it has your IP address, which they can use to do a reverse lookup and see what your where you're located, your address even. And then also they have uh, uh, the ability to find out what machine you're running on and all those different types of information uh, to produce a fingerprint of the user, of who you are. And incognito browsers hide some of that information by allowing you to change it. For example, to say that your browser is not Firefox or Opera or Edge, but is actually Chrome, or allow you to say, well, my machine is really running Linux on 386. But so that's incognito browser. And as you see, those are pretty much give you some anonymity, but not really that much. The next level is browser add-ons. These are tools that you can add in, and I'll get to some of them and show you some of them. And what these add-ons do is basically scan what the website is serving to you and will actually block some of it, or actually uh, stop it from being added, uh, being saved, and being allowing you to be tracked. The next level of security is the VPN. That's a virtual private network, and this allows you to basically hide where your real location is. The one thing about VPNs is that they do keep information about who you are. So there are ways where they can actually track back through the VPN. And then the final highest level of anonymity is the Tor browser. And Paul will get into that. And I'll let Paul talk about that later. So let me start with a website that will give you real-time tracking information on websites. Now, this is a website called Blacklight that allows you to put in a website. It goes and it searches through the website and checks out to see what the website is if it's tracking you and how it's tracking you. And for example, I'll show you the Bank of America and what that will show is that it does 4 ad trackers are found. There are 9 third-party cookies being dropped on your machine, and 1 canvas fingerprint found. Now, a canvas fingerprint is that it basically puts on your screen an image, flashes the image, and then from that, it can capture a lot of details about your screen's ability. And just for follow on, if you go to google.com, you'll see 1 ad tracker, and with DuckDuckGo, there are no ad trackers, but I'll get to that in the future. So anyway, let me show you the Blacklight. And it's a website, again, available to everybody. And you just put in a location. And what I'll do is put in Bank of America. And it scans that website. And then we'll give you the results of what it found on that website. Now, basically, what it's doing is reading, it's setting itself up as being a client, and then seeing what is being dropped on it. And that's how it finds out about the, for example, the tracking cookies and the third-party cookies and the fingerprint. And it even shows you what the image was that was flashed on your screen to determine it. Now, in a lot of cases, these are not all bad. For example, fingerprinting can be used for example, with Bank of America, to make sure that you are you. In other words, they'll fingerprint your machine, and that way, when you log back in, it will know that it agrees that you are the one who is logging into the account. It's allowed. So anyway, I advise everybody to just, it's fun to put different websites in there and see what they're tracking. And it does give you detailed information, as I show here. And at the end, it tells you who is basically tracking you. For example, Adobe, Alphabet, and Neustar is a performance tracker, which a lot of websites use. Let me go back to the slides. And as I mentioned that if you put in google.com, you get one ad tracker, and DuckDuckGo, you get 0 ad trackers. Just to give you what the differences are between Google and DuckDuckGo. Google basically collects your data and returns search results according to your profile. So it's building a profile of you. And thus, every time you do a search, you will get results that are unique to your profile. The profile, by the way, is also built as you go to other websites. What happens is the websites will put in third-party cookies, which will allow you will allow Google to access your data and see where you're going and what you're doing on the different websites. The way Google makes money in this world is by basically auctioning off your profile, and what it does will put out for bids a lot of your profile information, and then they will bid on whether or not they want their website to be presented to you. And that's how Google makes their money, basically. So that's why, for example, if you do a lot of searches on Amazon or Walmart or any of those other locations, and let's say you're looking for coffee pots, all of a sudden, when you go to Google and type in coffee, it'll all of a sudden show you all the different coffee pots that are available. DuckDuckGo, on the other hand, does not collect any data, but will use your location to return search results. So, for example, if you put in DuckDuckGo a car, search for a car, it will give you 3 car dealerships near you, and then all the other information on cars. It does not track you. Because it doesn't track you, all the users will get the same result. In other words, if I typed in car in DuckDuckGo, or if Paul typed it in, we'd see the same result since we're in the general location. And the way they do make their money is by selling the ads for the location, and that's why they'll put 1 or 2 ads in the front of your search results for you to see. That's the basic difference in searching in the search engines. Both of them use the same type of web spiders that go out and scrape the net for information. So the results are going to be quite similar in content, and there's really not much of a difference between the two. Now, let's get to the browser anonymity. And your browsers are basically the way that you're protected. As I mentioned here, Edge, Safari, Firefox, and Opera have all now built-in basic levels of cookie blocking and tracking ability. Firefox has even gone a little further and put a protection dashboard which shows enhanced protection levels. In other words, it'll show you a daily report of how many cookies it's blocked, and also will give you if it has any data breaching from your email address. Google Chrome is probably the worst in having basic levels of cookie blocking, in that it does not have any built-in blocking ability. You basically have to do add-ons to do that. And just to show you how this works, here's Cover Your Tracks. It's a website by the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, which will give you a report on your browser. And here's an example of it. It allows you to test your browser, and this should show it's running right now. What this does is it checks your browser by trying to do all the things that typically a tracker would do, such as dropping cookies, dropping super cookies, fingerprinting. And as you see here, since I do have add-ons in this browser, so it is set to stop block tracking ads. It's set to block invisible trackers. And one bad thing is that I do have a unique fingerprint for this machine. And just to show you some of the results that it can get for you, for example, from your header, it shows that that I'm on a Macintosh, Mac OS 11.2.3 is what I'm running. It gives the information on the WebKit, the browsers that are available. And then it will also tell you what the information that the header has. In other words, what I'm willing to accept, whether it's text or HTML, whether I can do compression or and what my language is, and other such things. Looking at the browser characteristics, this example is using Chrome, and it goes through and tells you all the ability of the Chrome browser, your time zone, where you are. For example, America, New York. The screen color depth it can get from the fingerprint. The system fonts, all the fonts that you have loaded. Do I have cookies enabled? Well, yes, I do have cookies enabled, because when I go to my bank, I want to be able to to log in easily, and therefore I do allow some cookies to be used.
Yeah, just pay attention to this.
I'm getting a little tired of it.
The super cookies are where they hide cookies in other locations, not just in the in the normal browser location for cookies. They'll actually drop it in. They'll even put it in your on a hard drive, in your memory, in your cache. There are a whole bunch of places that they can drop it. And then, as I mentioned, the fingerprinting tells them type of video card and other things about your system. And again, it even gets down to I'm running on an Apple M1 processor. And again, platform is a Mac Intel. The M1 has the ability to simulate the Intel processor also. And again, it goes through all this information. I have 8 processors, I have 8 gig of memory, and all that stuff. So I suggest that one of the best things to do is to go ahead and test your browsers just to see what your level of protection is. It really does come in handy just to make sure you are safe from being tracked. And then the next thing I want to talk about is add-ons. These are things that when you add into your browser gives you even a higher level of protection. DuckDuckGo, for example, has a privacy browser, which on Android and iOS is a separate app, a separate browser that it uses. And for other machines for desktops and laptops, it has add-ons, privacy essential add-ons, which you can add into your browser to be able to protect it. Then you have other things such as ad blockers, Ad Blocker Plus, Ad Blocker Ultimate. And again, these are all items that block ads that want to be presented to you and as pop-ups and on your website that you're looking at. For example, with ad blocker, if you go to certain locations, they'll, depending upon your tracking history, will show you different items in one of the fields of the web page that you're looking at. The next one, which is actually pretty well known, it's called Disconnect, and it's at disconnect.me. They were actually one of the first ones in 2005 to point out how you're being tracked and what is being what information is being kept by the other websites, and just where all the information is going. And it also allows you to block those websites. And it is an open source table driven browser add-on, runs on Mac OS, Windows, and Linux. For Android and iOS, it doesn't have the ability to do add-ons, but what you have to do is basically buy their paid VPN to get that ability. And then there's another one, and again, this is from the Electronic Frontiers Foundation, the Privacy Badger. And this uses an algorithmic policy method to see how they're tracking you. And what this will do is look at, for example, Java scripts that are being run, cookies that are being dropped, and see if they're being used to track you, and just how they're doing it. And as I say here, that again, Firefox, Edge, Android, Opera, almost all of the browsers are supported. Safari is not supported yet, but hopefully in the near future, it will. And just to give you a quick example of this, oh. Let me just as usual, technical error here. Okay.
I can't connect to it either. It must
Oh
be the
well.
site.
Yeah. Let me just go back to the first example, which was the Bank of America website. And this is their basic website. And what I'll show here is their what these add-ons will show you. For example, this is what Badger is searching, and it found two tracking potentials. One is this DPM DMDEX.net, and the other one, what the barcodes here are, they'll give you three: red, yellow, and green. The red means it's being blocked, that it's a tracker, and it knows that you don't want to see it. The yellow means that it's not being blocked. You might want to block it, but it feels that the whatever the tracker is, it might be being used to look to help you log in, to allow easy login. Then you have disconnect. And one of the nice things about disconnect is that you can get a graphical representation, and it shows you that, again, the website that you're looking at is Bank of America, and it will show all the tracking locations that are being used by this website. And you can see here that it's blocking one of them, dmdx.net. The other ones are basically being allowed to go through. One is the Bank of America website itself, and the other one, I'm really not familiar what that one is, but it's considering it relatively safe. But if you want, if you think that it is could be a problem, you can always block it. Again, what this will show is a red circle, meaning it's a tracker and it knows about it and it's blocking it with a cross. If you want to unblock it, you can. So if you have any problems going to a website and accessing it, it will give you that ability. And again, it gives you a list. If you want to see a listing view, it shows you here if anything, if it's sending any information to Facebook, Google, or Twitter, how many advertising requests you've gotten. Here it's 3 requests. Are any analytics being sent back to another website? Social, in other words, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those sites it keeps track of. And then the final one is content. In other words, what web page are you looking at? How long are you spending? What are you entering? Well, some of them will track, will do key tracking so that it knows what you're entering, all that information. And disconnect actually is probably the best one to add if you're going to add any of them. So what I would suggest you do is make sure that you've gone to the settings on your browser and set them so that you do have anonymity set up. By the way, there's a new web feature called Do Not Track Request, which it will set a flag in your header when you go out to get a web page, and it will say, do not track me. Now, in principle, it sounds like a great idea, but because it's voluntary, the website does not have to obey the do not track me feature. So they can still go ahead and track you with third-party cookies, etc. The other thing is, for example, DuckDuckGo. Again, it just allows you to set a lot of tracking features where you don't, where it'll protect you from certain trackers. I guess I'm not going to go into VPNs because really it's just a remote browsing. And so what I'll do now is turn it over to Paul, and let me, so Paul can talk about the Tor browser, and then we'll do question and answers. So, okay, Paul.
To those of you who have who use Firefox, you might think that this looks an awful, might look very familiar. Apart from the home page being purple, it looks a whole lot like Firefox. And there's a reason for that, in that this Tor browser is, they start with the Firefox browser, which is open source software that's developed by the Mozilla Foundation. And it's a very secure browser to start with. And the source code is available to be used in other ways. And so the TOR organization, which is a consortium of basically volunteers across mostly Europe and the United States, but other places. So they have taken this, the Firefox browser, and they have done some things to it, added some features and re-engineered how it communicates to the world. So, so at one level, Tor just looks like any other browser. But now let me read you from the Wikipedia page about Tor to explain why it's different. Well, I'll just say this, that Tor, we think of Tor as being a browser, but really it's not just the browser. It's a Tor, there's a network behind Tor, the Tor network. And that's critical, as you'll see. So here's what it says on the Wikipedia page. I couldn't say it this well, so we'll read this. It says, Tor is a free and open source software enabling anonymous communication by directing internet traffic through a free worldwide volunteer overlay network consisting of more than 7,000 relays in order to conceal a user's location and usage from anyone conducting network surveillance or traffic analysis. Using Tor makes it more difficult to trace the internet activity of the user. This includes visits to websites, online posts, instant messages, and other forms of communication. Tor's intended use is to protect the personal privacy of its users, as well as their freedom and ability to conduct confidential communications by keeping their internet activities unmonitored. Now, let me back up and give a little bit more sort of general context for this. And George talked some about this, but sort of my view of network communications and the internet is colored a lot by the fact that I was at Bell Labs in the days when Unix was developed on the floor above me, and I knew the guys that were doing this, and Unix became quite central when computers started talking to each other. You know, we actually had a presentation, and we heard from Leonard Kleinrock recently, who was a good buddy of Bob Lucky's, and he was one of the guys who built the first internet connection between two places. That was the birth of the internet. And so places like Bell Labs and UC Berkeley, where Kleinrock was, and some other places were very involved in these things as they were being created. And the intent, well, first of all, the idea of computers talking to each other was actually brand new. And before that, computers were just standalone devices, and the only thing they did was read cards or tapes and punch cards or write tapes, and they were isolated. And then it's hard to remember back when that was the case, but then people like Kleinrock and others started connecting computers together so that they could have networks and share data. And but in the beginning, the idea was to open up the world so that information could be shared. And so collaborators in different universities, you know, the internet, for instance, its predecessor was the ARPANET, and ARPA is the Advanced Research Projects Agency of the U.S. government and of the Army, actually. So ARPANET was developed so that computers could communicate to each other, and ARPA gave out defense contracts to collaborators in universities that were doing the research and development, and these people all needed to talk to each other. So this ARPANET was created initially as an academic thing for all the people that were contributing to the this military research communication project. And then the idea was to open up these groups to be able to share communications. And since there were just a few computers talking to each other, the computers themselves were secure from other outsiders because nobody else was doing in computer communication. But it was really during the Clinton era that it was decided to take this ARPANET and commercialize it and turn it into internet, which would no longer be run by the government and the military and so on, and universities that had the research grants, but it would be run commercially. And so we ended up with the internet. So although it had been designed initially to be open and to make it as easy as possible to share information, and it was wonderful for that, people soon realized that it's not only the good guys that are going to use this wonderful new tool, but also the bad guys. And they realized that they had not paid any attention at all at the beginning to security and privacy. So then we've had a sequence of developments and sort of retrofitting protections onto the internet, basically. So for example, with originally our communications over the internet were not encrypted. And if you sent an email, your information goes through several routers and relays from you to the destination. And that's always been true the way the internet is designed. You don't get a direct connection to anywhere else, but it goes through a series of routers. And in principle, the people running those routers could look into the packets of information that are flowing through and just see what they contain. So it would in principle be easy for people to eavesdrop on you. And for most people, that doesn't matter because they're not doing anything that needs to be very private. But, you know, for financial transactions, it has to be private, even for ordinary people. And, you know, other people just might want, for various good reasons, and maybe some nefarious reasons, they want their communications to be private. So one of the things that was finally done fairly recently was to create end-to-end encryption on most internet communications. So I'm sure you've noticed that we used to have HTTP:// as the prefix on any website address. And that created unencrypted communication paths between you and the website you visited. In principle, bad actors could eavesdrop on what you're doing and no information about you, steal your information and so on. But now there's been great pressure on all website owners and developers to move to HTTPS, which is a newer protocol that does actually have end-to-end encryption. So that's pretty much universal now. So, you know, I don't have to worry that somebody is going to look at my information as it's traveling from me to Amazon, for instance, if I'm buying stuff, or from me to the bank, because even though the packets are going through a public channel, every single packet of information is encrypted, and nobody, you know, this is strong encryption and nobody can break that. So, but that's not enough. That's helpful. But then we have things like Google comes along, and everybody wants to use Google because it's really a good tool for finding things. Suddenly you can find anything in the entire internet. It feels like it's anything in the entire universe. You just Google it and you can find it. But in order for Google to do its wonders, you know, it has to collect certain information, like wants to present results to you, as George was saying, that might be more relevant to you. So it sort of builds up a profile of you in order to help you find what might be interesting to you. But guess what? It turns out it's also valuable information to sell to advertisers. And basically when George says they're selling your information, what they're really selling is a small spot on your screen where their ad will appear with a click through to their website. And Google not only doesn't just sell the information, Google sells the service to the advertisers as well, so that those ads that pop up, the actual mechanisms that do that are also provided by Google, you know. But anyway, so a browser like that is taking information about you and sharing it whether you like it or not. And that seems like a violation of privacy. And in some cases, it's a serious issue. So they come along with a browser like DuckDuckGo, which, as George was explaining, it's sort of the antithesis to Google. It's built on the principle that it will save nothing about you. It will not support third-party cookies. Cookies are used for a lot of good purposes. Even within a browser session, there are cookies that sort of remember what pages you were at a couple of moments ago, and you go back there, and you can carry on. But all of the cookies, those are called session cookies, but all of those are thrown away and trashed at the end of a DuckDuckGo session, and nothing is saved. Not only that, but browsers save a lot of information on your computer apart from cookies. Every web page you visit is cached. There's a big place on your disk somewhere where every web page you've visited in recent weeks is cached. It's an enormous cache. And even though outsiders in principle don't have access to that, still there are times when computers are broken into and all of that information is out there, and the people who broke in can help themselves to it. Or if you use a laptop and you lose it, you leave it in the airport, somebody can get a hold of it and get access to all your information. So one of the things about DuckDuckGo, I believe, is that it is really careful to clean up its tracks, and it leaves nothing on your computer, not even any cache files, and it certainly isn't remembering passwords for you as a convenience, none of that. So that gets you a long way toward privacy and data protection. But even though the information about where you visited, the information that you are exchanging with places that you visit is all encrypted because of HTTPS, and maybe not stored on your computer because you're using DuckDuckGo. Still, if somebody is doing a network analysis and traffic analysis on the internet, they can tell what websites you visited, because it's like phone calls. The FBI, they don't have access to the content of your phone calls, but they have access to the meta, what they call the meta information. So they can tell what it's sort of the information that appears on your bill, what places you called and the timestamps and so on and so forth. Well, a similar thing is true, even though we have encryption. There are some people who don't want their adversaries to even know what websites they visit. Especially people living in Eastern Europe, in oppressive regimes, and dissidents and people like that, they need this, because otherwise, they're going to be outed, and this could lead to very bad things in their lives. So, and even ordinary people might want to have private communication sometimes. So the next level is to hide the information about what places you're visiting on the internet through your web browser. And that's really where TOR comes in. So TOR sort of has the look and feel of an ordinary web browser, but when you make a connection to some place on the internet, it does not make a connection directly to that website, so that somebody doing the traffic analysis and looking over your shoulder could tell where you visited. But instead, you connect to a special server that's in this TOR network, And then the TOR network creates for you a path through the TOR network. So it hands off the connection to several other servers in the TOR network. And each one it's not just an encrypted network, but it also encrypts the information about what the nodes are in the network. So the whole path within the TOR network is hidden and encrypted from anybody trying to track what you're doing. And this is a very temporary path through the TOR network. Every time you connect to TOR and connect to a particular website somewhere, TOR will create a different path by randomly selecting these special TOR relays. And not only that will it be different every time you connect, but they will actually every 10 minutes choose a new route. So even if somebody was somehow breaking into some of the TOR nodes and trying to track you, the whole route's going to change in 10 minutes. In fact, you can click a button and change it anytime you want. And these nodes are maintained by people who are not the government authorities, but volunteers and groups of volunteers. And they are in a number of countries. So even if a country managed to get control of everything that's happening in its country, there are still other TOR nodes that would be protected. So it's a very secure network, and it hides the routes that you take. And so it hides where you're visiting. Now, there's a price, of course, that you pay for that, and that is the efficiency, because the packets you're sending to, maybe ultimately Amazon or something, they're being routed through a number of servers, probably mostly in Europe, and then back to the United States. So it's likely to be a little bit slower. Your user experience through a TOR browser is likely to be a little bit slower, but it's going to be very private. So having said all that, let me first of all do a little demo of web browsing in an ordinary way from my computer here. So I'm going to share a different screen now, which is my plain old Firefox screen. And since George was already talking about this example, what happens if this is just on my home computer using plain old Firefox? I have Comcast as my ISP, and I just do a Google search on car dealership. By the way, on one of George's lists, it said Alphabet was one of the players. Well, Alphabet is Google, in case you have forgotten. That's Google. Google created a parent company so that it could basically buy other companies and not make them subsidiaries, but whatever. So anyway, so I do a search on car dealerships, and maybe we'll say BMW, and notice it's finding BMW of Springfield already. There's some ads here, Flemington, BMW USA, but now here's BMW Springfield. It's a Google hit. It's high on the list. Why is that? Well, Google knows where I am. It knows, first of all, it knows a lot about me just because I have an account at Google, and I've signed up and given Google my home address and telephone number and email address and everything, right? I have Google Mail. They know a lot about me. But even if I weren't at home, they have my IP address where I'm coming from at that moment. And as George said, it's very easy to, anybody can do this. You can do what's called geolocation, and which is basically reverse mapping an IP address to a physical location, a street address, or at least the town, neighborhood. So it knows that I'm near Springfield. Actually, my connection to the internet through Comcast is probably in Springfield, which is next door to Summit. So probably they think I'm in Springfield. I'm really in Summit. So I get local results, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. If I was really interested in buying a car, of course I want local results, and I don't have to type in the name of the town. But now, suppose I do the same thing. Now go back to this other window, which is now logged in from my computer, but through this Tor browser. And the Tor browser only connects to a node that's somewhere in the Tor network. That's the only place it connects to initially. And then remember, Tor is creating a circuit within the Tor network, and it's coming out somewhere else. And then at the other end, it's connecting through to the place that I want to connect, which in this case is going to be the native browser of Tor, which happens to be, guess what, DuckDuckGo. So here I will, suppose we look for car dealership. BMW in the Tor browser, which has no idea where in the universe I am, and using DuckDuckGo, which is also anonymizing my browsing. So, this surprises me a little bit. It seems to know I'm in the United States. Maybe, George, you can explain to me why that. Or maybe I randomly got assigned to an initial node that's in the United States. So,
Yeah, you probably have, because a lot of times when I'm using Tor, I'll wind up getting a page that's in German or Swedish or
right.
another European foreign language.
Right. So look, what I'm going to do is I'll just leave that tab there, but let's just, so DuckDuckGo is trying to anonymize where I'm coming from. So instead of just, I'll still use Tor, but I'll use Google to look for car dealerships. Okay, so this is a Google page, but it's through the Tor browser. And I'm going to look for car dealerships. BMW. It's still saying, but other places in California and other places in the US. Okay, so but now, so let me go a little bit further. Through the Tor browser, I can say, well, I could ask, well, what IP address do I have at this moment that I was assigned? My initial IP address, if I'm using Tor, has to be one, it has to be the IP address of one of the Tor nodes. And so you can go to a website that will just echo back your IP address. Well, this is one that I wrote myself. And so there's my current IP address, 193.70.45.145, 144. And here's somebody else's version of that, which has a lot of bells and whistles. I think first of all, I can type in an IP address and just say, where's it located? And so that IP address is located in Ukraine. Yeah, okay, and then from there it connects to other places, and then the end destination, it shouldn't even know Ukraine because it should be the other end of the route, and it's not possible to trace the route back. So it does look like I've got an IP address which is effectively in Ukraine. Okay. So now it's fun to do little experiments like this. You know, you pick up an IP address and and you go to websites that let you do this analysis and see, well, where do you think I am? And that is a lot of fun. But now, since we don't have a whole lot of time here, let's take a different tack right now and go back and look a little more closely at the TOR network itself. I'm going to, again, change the screen share back to my plain browser, just so it's faster. And now I'm going to go to TOR TOR flow, TOR project. Oh, TOR flow, that's the thing, TOR flow. So there's this wonderful website where you can see visualizations of the TOR network. And using a tool that I think is also made available for other networks, but in this case, let's see about shorter innovation. Let me get to a different one. TOR network app. It's a certain page at the TOR flow website. Ah, okay. So first of all, turn off the particles. Now it's like a Google map. I can drag it. I can zoom in and out. Right now, I'll zoom out so I can see the countries that are involved. It's mostly, as I say, North America and Europe. Of course, a lot in Eastern Europe. That's really where most of this stuff was developed. And then it goes out into Russia and Belarus, Kazakhstan, a little bit here and there. So those are all the actual physical locations where these TOR routers are, TOR relays or routers. I'm using those two terms interchangeably. I suppose technically they're not quite the same thing, but for our purposes today, that's okay. But in some cases, there's more than one of these routers at a specific location. So here's a place called opstar.net, tablet, whatever, in France. And it seems like they have 662 physical relays there. These are separate routing computers. So that's a pretty big installation. And here's another one that's got 916. And some over here, just 2, and so on and so forth. Okay. And in this particular view, I guess the size of the circle is related to the number of TOR relay devices at that location. So, so I can turn the nodes on and off. I can turn the country labels on and off if I want to see the network better. So let's see them off for now. There's something called top client connections. I'm not sure what a top client is, but there's certain countries where the top clients are, and they turn up in different colors. I guess the lighter the color, the higher it is in the hierarchy of top clients, and maybe TOR developers. And the base map, I can do a few things to that. But now let's go back to this particles, and I'll turn on what's called particles. And they're, let me turn the speed and the particle width. Okay, so what we're seeing now is basically all of the paths between every pair of TOR nodes. And it's being shown as a sort of a dotted line. And the density of dots is proportional to the traffic intensity on the TOR network. I mean, in effect, you could say each dot represents so many megabytes of traffic in real time going on that route between those two devices. So you'll see more of the nodes are actually in Europe. So here we are in New Jersey, and I connect to TOR. It might connect me to one of the handful that are in North America, but much more often than not, I get connected to some place that's in Sweden or Germany or France, as George was saying. And you can kind of tell where you're connected because if you start doing some web operations from there, and some ads pop up because the end site you're going to is just an ordinary ad site that's got plenty of ads, but it's popping up ads that are local to some city in Sweden and might even be in different languages. So it's kind of fun to see that. But at least you know that the end website doesn't know who you are or where you're coming from, and it thinks you're a local person there.
Hey, Paul, this is Alan.
Yeah, hi, Alan.
I'm curious, what's the point in the far right corner? I'm betting that's Moscow.
Oh, this
Far
one?
upper right.
This guy here?
Yeah.
I think I'd probably have to zoom in to tell. I'm not sure.
It's okay. I was curious.
Well, it's better up on my Russian geography. I'd know immediately. I mean, yeah, I think St. Petersburg is over on the coast, so this must be Moscow.
Yeah. And then how about Africa? What's the one point in Africa?
Let me see if turning on labels. Yeah, it's Moscow. Turn on labels.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't know. You can look at this yourself and figure it out. But I just want to show a little bit more about this. There are other pop-up things here. You can actually see history on this map. This is actually quite remarkable. Let me get these things out of the way. They're part of the. Base map. There's something beneath this. Not sure why it's not showing. So let me carry on a little bit. So you notice that the dots are actually kind of moving, and that shows they're all moving at the same speed, but that shows there's traffic, and it's bidirectional traffic. So I can increase the particle speed to give you a sense of that it's actually really fast, because these are, electrons moving through wires or photons moving through fiber optic cables. And let me come back out again. Now I can increase the path width, and that does something weird and wonderful. And I'll increase the particle speed. So now, when you have a large density of particles going down a single path, it just turns into all white. You can't see anything. So what this does, and this is a trick of visualization that we data scientists have been doing for a long time. Instead of just showing them along the straight line path, they're randomly offset to the sides. So basically it becomes more like a pipe and allows you to see the particles inside the pipe. And so I can change the width of the pipe in this visualization. And I can zoom in and out, and it certainly is a lot of fun. I'm not sure how important some of these things are, but it gives you a sense of also just how extensive it is. I mean, so the other thing that I read, the Wikipedia page said there are actually 7,000 nodes in this network. And of course, it's all free. Look at Iceland.
Paul, out of curiosity, with TOR, how come repressive governments allow these sites? Because you can see it in, you know,
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
I can answer that, Paul.
Go ahead, George.
Actually, for example, China blocks Tor Tor endpoints and the Tor traffic. So what Tor has done is built in bridges that actually hide the initial packets not as Tor, and you connect to a bridge site, which then connects to the Tor network. So they use that to get around the countries that are blocking the Tor traffic.
well,
Yeah, and it's not just countries. I have to tell you, when I was doing some playing around yesterday and today to look for examples, I said, well, what if I'm connected through Tor and I go to Amazon.com and I want to buy something? Amazon would not connect to me. And why is that? Well, because I'm coming from a Tor node. The actual IP addresses of all 700 nodes, that's all public information. The Tor network is transparent in the sense that the software that's used and the IP addresses and the location, look, it's all out there. You're looking at it. What's really hidden is the information that's flowing on those paths and the identity of the people that are doing this. So yeah, the repressive countries, it's really hard for these countries to really selectively block certain kinds of communications, certain kinds of, you take a country like North Korea, if they cut themselves out from the entire world, from all communications on the internet, just because they're afraid of some of them, they end up being permanently a really backward country. So, and it's very hard for them to do this. I mean, it's so easy for packets to slip through, and there's only smart techies figure out the workarounds. So another interesting question related to that is, here's this wonderful tool, and I wanted to point out to you, it's kind of obvious that if this tool, which is just trivially available, I mean, just go to torproject.org. They didn't get the name tor.org because that was already taken. So it's torproject.org, or just go do a Google search on Tor download. And you just download and install this browser. It's just about the same amount of effort and time and everything as just installing Firefox or Google Chrome. It's really quick and easy. And you don't have to do anything to configure it. You just open it up and it works. And you get all of this stuff, all of this structure working for you in its privacy, just that trivially. But it's wonderful for us if we worry about our privacy, but it's also a godsend to all the bad actors out there who want to carry on their criminal activities. And so you think, well, why would anybody build? Can't we have people like built Tor because it's a bad thing? It makes it, it's basically a tool used by criminals. I'm sure people feel that that's a terrible thing. And not only was it built, but who built it? The U.S. government built it. We built it. The military built it. Well, why would the military build something that could be used by all of these other entities? Well, it's because they themselves needed to be able to do secure communications around the world. And it's not just secure, but the whole internet is highly decentralized and redundant, and you could blow away any node at all, and the whole internet just kind of instantly reroutes around it. So it's very hard to knock out a large chunk of the internet for any period of time. So those are interesting questions.
Probably, since we've been going for an hour and 15 minutes, can we wrap up this part, Paul, and we'll try to take 10 or 15 minutes for questions?
Sure. No, I just say one thing to go to questions. you know, George and I have touched on a lot of topics that we didn't have time to go into. And if people are interested, you know, there's a very interesting protocol that's called the onion routing that is used that's crucial to Tor. So it can actually hide the routes. And that's just an interesting technical thing and quite an impressive idea. But there are lots of things like that.
We can do other
Go
sessions.
ahead. So we do questions? Oh, John Tomaszewski has your hand up.
Yeah, first of all, I really enjoyed the talk. And while you guys were doing this, because I always use an iPad, I found out that there are a ton of this type of blocking apps available. But that brings up my question, that one of you may be able to answer. I know that like when you use an app from Bank America, that's not using a regular browser. Do you guys know anything about that type of thing where if you use a program on the computer or an app and they use their own browser, is that going through a regular browser or how does that work? Does anybody know anything about that?
Well, I am unaware. I use Bank America and I just use a regular browser.
No, I understand that.
So, but you're saying that other people who, you know, they're also somewhere else in Bank America, people who are doing more serious things, or maybe financial institutions talking amongst themselves, they don't use browsers. Instead, they use standalone apps, which are purpose-built by Bank of America. You know, certainly it's plausible, but I have no knowledge of that. Can't answer the question.
That I think John's getting at, correct me if I'm not right, is on an iPad or an iPhone. I mean, I use Bank of America and I go to the site when I'm on.
An app.
What
I
do
see.
mostly, but I have the Bank of America app and I have on my phone and my iPad. Do they just default to Safari, or I mean, it's an interesting question.
No. So, yeah, for an app, so that gives you a user they can build a user interface that actually fits and works well on an iPhone. And it's really hard to do that with just a web browser because the developer tools for websites just aren't adequate to give you all the fine control that you need to build a good app for an iPhone. So yeah, that would be, they probably use the same communication protocols, but it's just a different interface on the client side. And it's probably even use some open source tools, it's a lot of the components probably that the app builder uses are the regular, browser components.
Well, how about at AT&T when you guys were there? Did you have your own browser or did you use just stuff that was out there to talk to each other and do things?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, I was at Bell Labs and yeah, there was a parent company somewhere called AT&T that we didn't have much to do with.
Sorry.
I mean, at some level they called the shots, but they made a lot of money doing their business and they funneled a lot of it to us so we could just be in our Ivy Tower and do our work. So we didn't have to pay too much attention to them. I mean, we had to sometimes do work that helped telephone business.
But then at Bell Labs instead.
I never thought of myself as an AT&T employee. And there were people that actually worked for, they go to a building that had AT&T on the name and they were really running the phone business. But we were just, the research people over in Murray Hill doing our thing. So anyway, it's just amusing, you say I was working for AT&T. I never thought of myself as working for AT&T. No, we never built web browsers. Oh, no.
All right. Thanks.
But people were very involved in the early communications, technology, streaming protocols and things like that, IP and encryption. Oh, absolutely. And, all of the sort of the piece parts that go into these things. But a modern day web browser is a phenomenal piece of software. When you think about all the things it needs to do. And it's no wonder the TOR project doesn't build their own. They start with Firefox and add a little of this and a little of that to it, especially in how it connects to the internet.
Okay, I believe Alan Hamilton is next in line.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I dialed in a little late, but I like hanging out with you Summit Old Guards but you're a bit paranoid. And I'm wondering why any normal person would, maybe they'd want to use DuckDuckGo, but why would any normal person be afraid of anyone knowing that they went on Amazon and looked at coffee grinders?
So Alan,
No.
I definitely want to throw that out to everybody, but I want to tell you where I stand on that.
Yeah,
My stake in the sand. I'm at the same place you are. I don't care. Personally, I literally 99% of the time don't care. And I don't use Tor. You know, I use Firefox and Chrome, and
right.
I don't care if people can see my communication, except on this few very rare occasions when, no, I don't want people to be able
Yeah.
to do what I
Yeah,
do.
if you're on
So
the
for instance, here's an
website-
example. I think I mentioned this earlier, maybe it was while we were just
Right.
chatting. During the ISIS era, you know, we were hearing all these reports that ISIS was putting, you know, broadcasting, have these websites, you could go and you can get recipes on how to build bombs using household chemicals. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, really? And do I have chemicals in my household that could be turned into bombs? I was so curious about that. I wanted to research that, not because I wanted to build a bomb, but just because I was astounded. Is that really true? You know how it is. You don't ask these guys. But I wasn't going to research that, especially at that period of time, and start Googling those words. How do I make a bomb with household? No, I didn't want anybody who's probably eavesdropping on my communications to even know I was asking those questions. So guess what? I used Tor.
Well,
Now,
good
maybe
for
Tor is
you.
overkill because I didn't have to worry about anybody analyzing traffic to know what websites I was going to. Probably just simple encryption was enough, and DuckDuckGo would have been enough, except I didn't know about DuckDuckGo.
NSA knows.
Yeah, but look, I take your point about what they collect because I use CCleaner on a regular basis. And CCleaner cleans out all the web history, all the cookies, the pups, and they show you the numbers after they do this. And it's amazing how much stuff it gets thrown out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's mostly the pups that crank up the numbers. Now, to everybody else who doesn't know what this means, a pup means potentially unwanted.
Program.
What's the P for? Program. So it's stuff that it's probably not malware. Nearly all of it is not malware, but it could be called crapware. I love that term. You know, it's people sort of observing your habits and selling your information to advertisers and stuff that, you know, I mean, you know, we all grew up with advertising. It's always been in our print media, and we just kind of learn to ignore it. Once in a while we look at it, you know, get ideas about what car to buy. You know, we actually use it. We complain about it, but we use it. And the ads that pop up online, you know, when there are so many ads that your actual page doesn't even function, you know, and then it's good to cross the line. Or if I'm watching a YouTube and they interrupt, you know, it's like TV and they're popping up ads, then I hate it. But, you know, the principle of having a little bit of advertising there that it pays for all these things that are otherwise free for me and are wonderful, I don't really resent that too much. I just think it's too much sometimes. But, you know, I would say, sorry, here I'm answering a question for everybody else, and you should answer, but we have had people in the past, even in TUG, who were so incredibly paranoid about this, and they, you know, made a point of unplugging their computer at night because they thought people were going to reach over to it when they weren't sitting there and plant malware on their computer.
Yeah, Paul, I bet it was one of the Bell Labs people.
Actually, it was a guy that spent his career working in New Jersey Bell. The one that I have in mind right now.
All
A
right,
very nice
thanks.
guy, one of my favorite guys, but he still is, he sometimes comes to us, and he was very
Might be on,
paranoid.
Paul.
Sorry?
He might be on. He was on earlier.
Yeah, it's great. He knows, I kid him.
Al,
But what about everybody else? Now, here I'm doing all the talking.
well, we are going to run out of time. So then we have at least 2 more questions. So
Okay, we have, oh, Alejo,
yes.
please weigh in, Al.
First, George and Paul, this was a fascinating session, and I learned an enormous amount. But the question I wanted to ask was, Apple is going to require iOS for iPhone to require apps to get explicit consent to track what people are doing for sharing with third parties. So there's a feud between Apple and Facebook on this matter. How do you think this will turn out? Is this going to be a big deal, or is it just going to be ho-hum?
I'm not sure I actually understood precisely what it is that's going to happen. From
Apple
what you
has
said.
announced that they're going to require all app providers to give you the option of buying in to have any of this tracking stuff done. In other words, if you're going to have to make the decision that you want, it's not the default, you're going to have to make the decision for future apps to buy in to let your information be tracked. And Facebook is seriously objecting to that. I don't know much more than that, but I have read a couple of articles about it. And actually, Al, let me just say that next week at TUG, we're doing our Techlash Part 2 discussion, which is the big internet companies that Jim Fagan has agreed to lead again. And that would be a good question for that group.
I'd like to just add something to that. When you go to the app to buy an app nowadays, there's actually a section that you have to buy into. Well, you don't have to buy in. If you buy the thing, you'll get it, but it'll tell you what it tracks or what confidence level, et cetera, that's been added to the apps.
So I do have a comment about this. And, you know, the Europeans are way ahead of us in terms of protecting privacy. And they've long ago passed laws that require this kind of thing. And you have to ask people's permission to do these things, which in the United States, you know, is taken for granted. They're going to do it to us and not ask. And so, you know, I go to websites in Europe sometimes and, you know, things like that pop up and I have to click, yeah, you can plant a cookie or not. You know, at a certain point, it becomes almost an impediment. It's kind of an extra hurdle, you know. So every time I want to do something on the internet, do I have to go through a whole dialogue about letting them do stuff that, you know, or if I'm installing an app, that's the time to ask. And so do I only get one chance to say no? Suppose I change my mind, you know. I forget that I said yes once. My conception of it is that you're going to, when you're acquiring the app, you're going to get this choice and you have to buy in if you want to. And after that, you can change it in settings. So it's not like you making a one. So there'll be a standardized way to change it in settings. And then presumably there'll be, you know, people will develop apps that will help you remind you what settings you know, what things you're allowing and see if you still want to allow them all.
Well, you're going to have to do it by app, apparently, according to what Apple has announced.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced it yet, but Facebook is seriously objecting to it, and I'm not sure I understand all those issues.
Well, Facebook has always been much more insidious about the way they do things than everybody else.
But we can discuss that one next week. It is almost what is it? It's almost 1:20, so we have now at least 3 more questions. So Griff, I want to end this by 1:30.
You know, okay.
Griff, you're muted. Griff, you're muted.
Maybe he's not there anymore.
He's there. I can see him. He's on my screen. He's talking. Oh,
now I am talking right now.
Now we can hear you.
Okay, that was what I wasn't looking in the right part of the screen. All right. My question is, are there very many people here who have been using Apple? I have been using Safari for years just because I hear a fair number of complaints about the kinds of things that Google does, as well as Google using a large part of my processor in order to get things done.
Hey, Griff, sorry to interrupt you, but I would like to actually ask that question you just asked and ask people to click yes or no on the reactions button. Do you use Apple as your primary computer?
Okay, well, I certainly.
Let's get a number for here.
Does that include iPads and iPhones?
Yes, yes.
No, well, not if you also use a regular computer. If that's your primary device, yes. Think about what is your primary computer that you use, and click yes if it's an Apple, no if it's not, and then the rest of the people maybe don't know how to click yes or no.
It's under reactions.
All right. So I'm seeing 12 and 5. 5 Apple, 12 not.
Okay,
4. Somebody just changed their mind.
I haven't changed my mind. It just keeps turning it off on me.
All right. So anyway, so it looks like about 1/3 are using Apple. At least it's a small sample because we didn't get everybody. Go ahead. Go ahead now.
So, Apple, as of a month or two ago, Apple's Safari started bragging about how much they had turned off a lot of the methods of grabbing information from you, and they give you statistics on which services they have blocked and which services are enabled on you. They have, and how many of them you have been using for the last week. Any comments on whether they're just bragging or whether this is actually a pretty good change in their service? I'm happy to see it, but I don't know whether to take this as Apple advertising or Apple just saying, yes, we think you'll like this feature and we hope you like it.
Or,
Yeah.
or maybe Apple wanting to build one device that they can sell all around the world. And they're, they have to meet the standards that are imposed on them in Europe, for instance, and other places. It's like California emission standards pretty much apply everywhere, even though legally they don't, because the manufacturers don't want to be building different versions of cars.
Well, I'm happy to see it. But I have to admit, I was not particularly aware of a lot of the features that you've been talking about. I've just been ignoring them and using Safari, figuring that Apple does a pretty good job of security.
I think you still need to do the add-ins even with Safari. It does have tracking blockers built in, but it doesn't have all of them. Disconnect is probably one of the best ones to use. And if you're using an Apple desktop, not an iPad or an iPhone, you can use Disconnect for free and have it on Safari, all of the browsers. It'll work.
I'm using an iMac.
So yeah, so you could easily add one of those add-ons into it.
Hey, Rich Jager, you got a quick question?
Yeah, I think it's quick. I'm using Windows and I'm just going with Defender for my cybersecurity. I've been using Edge since I got a new computer. I have not used DuckDuckGo. So my question is, if I use DuckDuckGo or some other browser, is that compatible with Defender? I know in the past, Defender's been kind of touchy about other kinds of security, and just wondering about the compatibility there.
Oh, that's a good question. I of course, sometimes those anti-malware programs will block things that are not malware, and then something doesn't work, and you drill down, and you realize it's being blocked, and invariably you can go into the settings, the advanced settings of the malware protection, and say, yeah, allow that. You can whitelist certain apps and certain IP addresses and things. And it's kind of a pain in the neck to do that, because first of all, I have to figure out, why is this piece of software not working, and that's usually not at all obvious.
By the way, probably Defender puts an add-on into the Edge browser, and that's what's doing your security for the browsing. And I'm not sure if it works, if it's added to other browsers.
Yeah, and if you turn it off, Defender might pop up a warning to you. Not because it doesn't want you to turn it off, which probably doesn't, but because there's the danger that some piece of malware that got on your computer turned it off and disabled all of your protection, and you don't even know it. So that's could be an important thing for it to tell you.
It's a bunch of years ago when I used a free one when I still had Windows XP, where it turned off my virus protection, and it was probably a
That's what they
month
do.
before I realized it.
That's right. Hey, Bill Heary, you're
Yeah,
not,
Bill Heary, that's the
you're
question.
not always with us, so why don't you say something, Bill? You've got your hand up.
Okay, I had a couple of comments on some of the previous questions and things. With regard to why privacy is important, there's another issue. The things that that help preserve privacy are also useful in blocking attackers. For instance, the fingerprinting that you talked about earlier. Hackers crawl the web and fingerprint things to look for systems that haven't been patched fully and then go after them. And there was a case of some research that I know of not that long ago, where a new computer was put on the web outside of any firewalls, outside of any corporate or government identification of what it was. And within hours, it had been fingerprinted numerous times, and the attackers were trying to plant malware. So
absolutely.
This privacy stuff doesn't always block that, but it helps. The second thing with regard to going to European websites and the privacy things, that's actually based on the EU privacy rule, something called GDPR. And if you go to a website that you haven't been to, you can actually click and see the different categories of cookies, and you can click on the ones you want to accept or not accept. If you accept the functional cookies and performance cookies, those won't share your information, but they will save the cookie that you have, so you won't have to go to that next time you go to that site.
Yeah.
Once you've gone there once, you should be okay. If
You call them site cookies as opposed to third-party cookies. Now, personally, I only accept chocolate chip cookies.
They're my favorites, but they're not the only ones I eat.
By the way, there's something also called Ever Cookies.
What's that?
It's a super cookie. What it is a JavaScript that will actually hide the cookies, as I mentioned, in other locations, not just in your where the cookies are normally kept. So if you do your normal clearing, you're not going to get rid of it. It's going to be hidden somewhere.
Sounds a lot like malware to me.
Yes, yes. That's why it's good to scan your complete machine every so often.
Anybody else? I hear a lot of grumbling stomachs.
Yeah, I think we've been going for an hour and 45 minutes, which is probably a new record for us. And I'm certainly not opposed to that. But
Thanks for your patience, everybody.
Yeah, targeted to more like an hour and 15 or so. Anyway, thank you, George and Paul. We really appreciate the fact that you enlightened us all this way. And I'll just make a plug that the next TUG meeting, which is next Tuesday, will be a discussion of the big internet companies and what the problems they are arising and how we deal with it. So all of you are welcome to join us for that as well. And other than that, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gotta stop.